Your morning coffee might be one of the most powerful blood sugar tools you own, or it might be one of the worst things you do to your glucose levels before 9 a.m. The difference between those two outcomes is not whether you drink coffee, it is how you drink it, when you drink it, what you add to it, and what you eat, or don't eat, alongside it. Most people over 60 have been drinking coffee the same way for 30 years. Same cup, same time, same additions, same routine. And most of them have no idea that 3 or 4 small adjustments to that routine could transform coffee from a morning glucose spike trigger into a genuine metabolic health ally, backed by decades of peer-reviewed research. The Harvard School of Public Health published data showing that regular coffee drinkers had up to a 29% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to non-drinkers. That number came with conditions, specific conditions, the type of coffee, the additions, the timing relative to food, the total daily amount. Today I'm going to give you every one of those conditions, clearly, so that the cup you've been drinking your whole life starts working for your blood sugar rather than against it. Here are the 6 strategies that ensure the protective mechanism wins. Strategy number 1, the water first protocol. Why what you drink before coffee determines your glucose response. This is the simplest strategy on this list, and the one with the most immediate impact on morning glucose management. Drinking coffee as the very first thing you consume in the morning, before water, before food, creates a specific and problematic metabolic sequence. Your cortisol level is naturally at its daily peak in the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking, a phenomenon called the cortisol awakening response. Adding caffeine to this already elevated cortisol state amplifies the stress hormone spike and its associated hepatic glucose release. Your blood sugar rises before you've eaten a single carbohydrate. Additionally, overnight dehydration, which is universal after 7 to 8 hours without fluid, reduces blood volume and concentrates blood glucose. Drinking coffee before water exacerbates this dehydration-driven glucose concentration effect. A study from the University of Bath found that drinking coffee immediately upon waking, before water and before food, elevated blood glucose response to a subsequent breakfast by 50% compared to a condition where water was consumed first and coffee was delayed 30 minutes. In adults with insulin resistance, this early coffee glucose amplification is particularly pronounced. The practical protocol: drink 16 ounces of water first, immediately upon waking, before coffee. Then wait 30 to 60 minutes before your first cup. This allows the cortisol awakening response to naturally subside, allows the dehydration to be corrected, and allows the chlorogenic acids in your subsequent coffee to work without competing against a cortisol-driven glucose surge. This one change, water first, 30 minutes before coffee, changes the glycemic context of your first cup entirely. Strategy number 2, the addition-elimination. What you put in your coffee is doing more damage than the coffee itself. I want to be direct about this because it is the single most common source of the blood sugar damage attributed to coffee in older adults. And it is almost universally overlooked because the additions are so habitual, they are invisible. Sugar in coffee is an obvious target. Teaspoons of refined sugar adding pure glucose to an already stimulating drink, producing an insulin demand before the day has properly begun. But the more insidious additions are the ones considered harmless. Flavored creamers. The liquid creamers sold in every supermarket, often marketed as calorie-light or sugar-free, contain high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, and artificial sweeteners in combinations that the research on the gut microbiome increasingly identifies as disruptive to the intestinal bacterial populations most critical for insulin sensitivity. A study from the Weizmann Institute found that artificial sweeteners, including those in sugar-free coffee creamers, significantly altered gut microbiome composition in ways that impaired glucose tolerance within 2 weeks of regular consumption. Flavored syrups, the vanilla, caramel, and hazelnut additions common in coffee shop beverages, can contain 20 to 30 grams of added sugar per serving. A single flavored latte from a coffee chain can deliver a glucose load equivalent to a candy bar before 8 a.m. The alternative additions that support, rather than undermine blood sugar control, are specific and well-studied. A small amount of cinnamon, quarter to half a teaspoon, in the coffee itself has been shown in multiple trials to reduce post-meal glucose response by activating insulin signaling pathways. A study from the American Diabetes Association journal found that cinnamon improved fasting blood glucose and insulin sensitivity in adults with type 2 diabetes within 40 days of daily consumption. Full-fat dairy, a splash of whole milk or a tablespoon of cream, provides fat that slows gastric emptying and blunts the glucose response to any carbohydrates consumed alongside the coffee, without adding sugar or the disruptive compounds in flavored creamers. Unsweetened cocoa powder, a half teaspoon added to coffee to create a mocha effect, provides flavonoids that independently improve insulin sensitivity and add negligible glucose load. Replace the flavored creamer and the sugar. Start with cinnamon and full-fat dairy. The taste adjustment takes 2 to 3 days. The blood sugar adjustment is measurable within weeks. Strategy number 3, the roast revelation, how the color of your coffee bean changes its blood sugar effect. This strategy surprises most people because it operates at a level most coffee drinkers have never considered. The roasting process that transforms a green coffee bean into the brown, aromatic bean you grind does not just change flavor. It changes the concentration of the blood sugar protective compounds. Chlorogenic acids, the primary glucose-regulating compounds in coffee, are heat-sensitive. They degrade during roasting. Light roast coffee retains significantly higher chlorogenic acid concentrations than dark roast coffee, which has been exposed to higher temperatures for longer, degrading a substantial portion of the chlorogenic acid content. A study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry measured chlorogenic acid content across roast levels and found that light roast coffee contained approximately twice the chlorogenic acid concentration of dark roast coffee from the same bean. The protective compound that inhibits hepatic glucose output was dramatically more concentrated in the less processed, lighter roasted product. This does not mean dark roast coffee has no protective value. It retains other beneficial compounds, including melanoidins, that also have glucose-lowering effects. But if blood sugar management is a priority, the roast level is a meaningful variable. The practical recommendation? If you currently drink medium or dark roast exclusively, experiment with light roast as a morning coffee. The flavor is different, less bitter, more acidic, brighter, and requires some adjustment. But the chlorogenic acid dose you're delivering to your liver's glucose output machinery is meaningfully higher. Cold brew coffee, interestingly, also retains higher chlorogenic acid concentrations than hot brewed coffee of the same roast level, because the lower temperature extraction process preserves more of the heat-sensitive compounds. If you tolerate cold or room temperature coffee in the morning, cold brew is a metabolically optimized preparation method. Strategy number 4, the food sequencing fix. What you eat before coffee determines everything. The timing and composition of food relative to your coffee is one of the most powerful and least utilized blood sugar management tools available to any coffee-drinking adult over 60. Here is the core principle. Caffeine consumed without food, in a fasted state, produces its maximum cortisol and epinephrine response. Those stress hormones stimulate maximum hepatic glucose output. Blood sugar rises. In a pre-diabetic or insulin-resistant adult, that rise is more pronounced and lasts longer than in a metabolically healthy younger person. Eating a protein and fat-containing breakfast before or immediately alongside your coffee does 2 critical things. First, it blunts the cortisol response to caffeine by providing macronutrients that activate the parasympathetic nervous system and modulate the adrenal response. Second, the protein activates GLP-1 secretion, the gut hormone that signals the pancreas to prepare insulin and signals the stomach to slow emptying, which flattens the glucose curve of anything consumed in that window. A study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that consuming protein before caffeine intake significantly reduced the post-coffee glucose elevation compared to caffeine consumed in a fasted state, with the protective effect most pronounced in adults with pre-existing insulin resistance. The practical sequencing for blood sugar protective coffee consumption. Eat a small protein-containing breakfast first. 2 eggs, a tablespoon of nut butter on a piece of whole grain bread, a bowl of full-fat plain Greek yogurt. Then drink your coffee. Or drink your coffee simultaneously with that food, never on an empty stomach. If you are specifically trying to reduce morning fasting glucose, the 6 to 7 a.m. reading before breakfast, this sequencing adjustment is one of the most impactful single changes you can make. Coffee first on an empty stomach is one of the most consistent contributors to elevated fasting glucose in adults over 60 with insulin resistance. Strategy number 5, The quantity calibration, how the right number of cups changes your diabetes risk. The research on coffee and diabetes risk is dose-dependent, and the dose curve has a specific shape that most people haven't been told about. The studies showing reduced diabetes risk with coffee consumption consistently find the benefit in a specific range, 2 to 4 cups daily. Below 1 cup, the protective chlorogenic acid exposure is insufficient to produce measurable glucose regulatory benefit. Above 4 to 5 cups daily, the cumulative cortisol burden of excess caffeine, the increased urinary calcium and magnesium loss from diuresis, and the disrupted sleep that impairs glucose metabolism the following morning begin to outweigh the protective effects. A landmark meta-analysis from Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, pooling data from over 40 studies and more than 1.1 million participants, found that coffee consumption was associated with significantly lower type 2 diabetes risk, with the peak protective association at 3 to 4 cups per day, and a reversal of benefit at higher consumption levels. A study from the Karolinska Institute found specifically that each additional cup of coffee, up to 4 per day, was associated with an 11% reduction in diabetes risk, with the dose-response relationship leveling and slightly reversing at 5 or more cups. For adults over 60, the optimal range is 2 to 3 cups daily, slightly lower than the peak for younger adults, because the aging kidney's reduced ability to clear caffeine extends its circulatory half-life, and because the sleep disruption from afternoon caffeine is more pronounced after 60, with poorer sleep directly impairing the next morning's glucose metabolism. The practical rule? 2 to 3 cups before 2 p.m. Not 4, not 5, not as much as I want. 2 to 3. And none after early afternoon, because sleep quality is a direct input to the next day's insulin sensitivity. Strategy number 6. The decaf advantage. The case for making your third cup decaffeinated. This final strategy is the most counterintuitive, because most people assume that the benefits of coffee are caffeine-driven. They are not. They are predominantly polyphenol-driven. And polyphenols, including the chlorogenic acids responsible for hepatic glucose output reduction, are present in decaffeinated coffee in concentrations essentially identical to regular coffee. What decaffeination removes is caffeine. What it leaves behind is virtually the entire protective polyphenol profile. A study published in the Archives of Internal Medicine, part of the same Harvard dataset referenced above, found that decaffeinated coffee consumption was also associated with significantly reduced type 2 diabetes risk, demonstrating that the protective mechanism is independent of caffeine and attributable to the polyphenol content. The risk reduction with decaf, while slightly smaller in magnitude than with caffeinated coffee, was statistically significant and clinically meaningful. For adults over 60 who are sensitive to caffeine, who have sleep difficulties, who have anxiety or cardiovascular conditions affected by caffeine stimulation, or who simply want to reduce total caffeine intake while retaining the glucose-protective polyphenol benefit, making the third cup of the day decaffeinated is a precise, evidence-based optimization. 2 regular cups in the morning, timed after water and after food. 1 decaffeinated cup in the early afternoon, delivering the chlorogenic acid benefit without the afternoon cortisol surge and without compromising the deep sleep stages that insulin sensitivity depends on overnight. This simple substitution allows you to enjoy 3 cups daily, comfortably within the protective range, while managing the caffeine burden that after 60 carries greater metabolic and sleep consequences than it did at 40. Here is the complete, practical daily coffee framework assembled from all 6 strategies. Strategy 1. Water first, always. 16 ounces of water upon waking. Then wait 30 to 60 minutes before your first coffee. Never coffee is the first thing in your mouth. Strategy 2. Replace the additions. Remove flavored creamers, syrups, and sugar. Replace with a splash of whole milk or cream, a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and optional unsweetened cocoa powder. These additions support blood sugar rather than undermining it. Strategy 3. Choose lighter roasts. Light roast and cold brew preparations retain significantly higher chlorogenic acid concentrations than dark roast hot brewed coffee. Make the shift gradually if the taste adjustment is significant. Strategy 4. Eat before or with your coffee. A protein-containing breakfast, eggs, Greek yogurt, nut butter, before or simultaneously with your first cup, blunts the cortisol-driven glucose surge and activates GLP-1 protection. Strategy 5. 2 to 3 cups before 2 p.m., not more, not later. The dose protective range is established. Afternoon caffeine disrupts the sleep that insulin sensitivity depends on the following morning. Strategy 6. Make your third cup decaf. All the polyphenol protection, none of the afternoon cortisol burden. A simple, evidence-based substitution that extends your coffee enjoyment without metabolic cost. Total cost of this protocol change? Essentially zero. You may spend slightly more on light roast coffee. You will spend considerably less on the flavored creamers and syrups you're replacing. The blood sugar benefit begins with the very first morning you implement these changes. I want to close with something that I think is worth holding on to. Coffee is not a guilty pleasure to be managed or restricted after 60. It is a complex botanical beverage with a genuine, well-documented protective relationship with metabolic health, when it is consumed with the intelligence the research supports. The cup you've been drinking every morning is not your enemy. The habit around it, the timing, the additions, the sequence, the quantity, those are the variables that determine whether your coffee is working with your metabolism or against it. You now have the complete picture. Every variable, every mechanism, every study that informs the recommendation, and every practical change is something you can begin tomorrow morning without buying a single new product, without changing the coffee you already love. That morning cup is waiting to become something more than comfort. It is waiting to become medicine. If this video gave you something useful, a habit to adjust, an addition to change, a timing to shift, please consider subscribing. Every week I bring you this same quality of honest, specific, evidence-based guidance with nothing to sell and everything to give. Next week I'm going to cover the complete morning routine, combining the coffee protocol from today with the water enhancement from a previous video and 3 additional evidence-based habits that research shows produces the most significant improvements in fasting blood glucose and morning energy in adults over 60. A complete sequence, grounded in science, achievable in under 30 minutes. You will want to be there for that one. Until then, drink your water first, add the cinnamon, eat the eggs before the coffee, and let the cup you've always loved start working properly for the body that's been carrying it this whole time.